Every conversation tells a story, and the best ones begin with honesty, courage, and a little curiosity. That's where Elsa Kurt comes in. She's an author, podcaster, and independent media personality, and this is where she brings real life to the table. Authors, thinkers, creators, leaders, everyday folks with extraordinary journeys. We sit down, we dig in, and we talk about what matters, what's messy, what's beautiful, and what just might inspire you to look at the world a little differently. So pour a cup of something good, settle back and join me. This is Elsa Kurt Interviews, where truth has a seat and everyone's welcome.
Well, hello, friends. Welcome back for another week of Elsa Kurt Interviews. I am Elsa Kurt, and I have a wonderful special guest for us today. Her name is Tulsi C, and here is a little bit about her.
Ever feel life has a deeper story it's not telling you? This week, we're talking about healing, identity, and the deeper questions people ask when life doesn't quite make sense on the surface. Our guest, Tulsi C, has written a memoir that explores her personal journey through trauma, spiritual searching, and what she describes as past life regression and soul remembrance. Join us.
Well, hello, Tulsi. Thank you so much for joining me today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Elsa, for having me. And how are you?
I'm very good, and I'm excited to hear all about you and your book. It sounds so fascinating and so interesting. I love memoirs, and yours is sounds like no exception to the rule. It sounds like it's going to be such a great read. It is called Reconnaissance Behind the Veil, and it is your memoir of your childhood experiences, marriage, grief, spiritual awakening. It just sounds so amazing. And I want to hear all about it. But before we start on that, tell me and our audience a little bit about you and your background.
Sure, Elsa. So I did my MS in computer sciences, and I worked in the corporate America for close to a decade. But then everything started shifting, energetically, and my life, sort of changed drastically and dramatically after that. I found myself at the crossroads of my life where there was a bigger purpose for me, more than just, going to a 9-to-5 job. And not that I was not, I was passionate for what I was doing because it was my choice, not like burdened by somebody else. However, that's where, I started my studio, which is the Anubhuti. And I'm a certified life coach, hypnotherapist, and practitioner for neurolinguistic programming, time, and emotional freedom techniques. And I do past life regression sessions and sound therapy, etc. So these are just high-level modalities. I work from kids aged of 5 all the way to, adults who are going through their struggles, their changes in their life, transition challenges, even with kids, who go through with a lot of bullying, body shaming, etc. So that's what I do it. And I have my studio in Atlanta, Savannah, Georgia, basically. And I'm more than passionate to help and heal others on their journey and things that I went through in my life where I did not have, in the beginning, understanding. I wish, that others do not have to go through what I have been through. So that's pretty much about who I am and what I do.
I, so love and admire and respect people like you who take the challenges and difficulties that they've been handed and make a decision to say, you know what, I'm not going to just stay in that place and live in that life. I'm going to take everything that's happened to me and channel that to helping others. So I respect and admire that so much. And I'm also amazed by the courage it takes to make such a huge shift from, you said you worked in the corporate world, and this is such a different lane from that. Was that always part of your life, like as part of your personal life and your personal growth, or did that happen later in life?
Yeah. No, so the spiritual aspect, I was blessed to have a mother, who sort of planted the seed in me, and she was highly psychic, highly, intuitive. However, she was a teacher. She wasn't in any of the healing modalities or a healer per se, but she touched so many people in her lifespan that I'm aware of, that sort of inspired me to be, to kind of follow her, footprints. And from the childhood, yes, I was a very hypersensitive, clairvoyant sort of kid, and I was blessed. As I mentioned, my mother never brushed me off, when I used to say or mention about my, experiences. She kind of acknowledged and validated and explained me. So the spiritual aspect started from the very, get-go when I was almost aged between 5 and 7. That's where the yoga, meditation, the chanting, all that was instilled in me. And I learned, different aspects of energy healing, etc., earlier in my life. But again, I never thought myself that it's going to be something that I will be doing, as my career, as my path. And as I mentioned, that I did my MS. So yes, I was working in the corporate world, but it was her departure. And prior to that, it was my near-death experience that opened the portal, to understand what's there, what's, life beyond death. And my experience with going through with near-death experience sort of shifted my perspective that I wasn't ready to transition to that life. And there was a bigger purpose for me. And that opened sort of the veil for me to understand that what do I need to do? What's my life purpose? And that doesn't restrict to, to just working. And there's a bigger, deeper reason. And that's where I think that was the catalyst, my mother's departure, along with near-death experience, that opened the gateway for me to not only, learn different modalities, to go through and to heal myself first, because I was grieving and I was in the most vulnerable state. As she was my mentor, she was my guide, and I didn't need best friend per se or friends, because she was everything for me. But at the same time, her abrupt and sudden departure shook me and kind of made me feel that I don't have any help or support, and the support or the dependency, which was a blessing. Now that I was, I didn't have that, so I had to adjust with that. I had to do a lot of introspection to understand that maybe that this is a bigger reason, bigger purpose, where I have to not only heal myself and to be self-sufficient, self-dependent, so I can be of service to others. So those two experiences shifted and transformed my life forever. And that still gives me chill when I talk about my mother and how it all started. So.
I can't imagine. I'm blessed to still have both parents alive, and to lose someone who's so instrumental and significant in your life. It's so, of course, understandable how that just rocks your world completely. And, again, as I said earlier, I love and admire the way that you take that and channel it for something good and something that can be useful, not only for yourself and your own healing, but for other people's healing who've experienced similar experiences as well. And then, of course, the next layer of your journey is that you started writing it. So when you started writing your experiences, did you know in the moment, in that time that you were writing a memoir, that this was something that you were going to put out in the universe? Did you think that you were going to keep it for yourself? Like, what was your thought process in the writing?
Oh, so there was, when I sort of going through my own awakening, and so from a very long time, I had this kind of desire to share or express my story to the world. And then somewhere, when this intuitive hit came, to let's do it, because there is no timing. When you have an intuition, when you're guided by that higher power, you just there's no time frame. And when that came in the beginning, it was more about that I want to share my journey, my experiences. But then it made me think that if I just restrict that to my journey, then it will be just like maybe like another story. However, my journey would be incomplete if I do not mention what all I learned in order to evolve, in order to heal myself and to release, and some of the deeper things that I was carrying it, not only just from this lifetime, somewhere from past, but there were, obvious things that I was sort of carrying it, whether it's bullying in the childhood, or going through, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy enough, I'm not beautiful enough. Those kind of challenges, even though I had that support system of my mother, but still I was going back and forth with that, and some were the patterns. So all the healing, that I did it during my journey. So I think it was crucial and critical to mention how I evolved and healed myself, because if I had not, probably, when you carry things within you, then there's, you continue to attract the similar pattern, the similar things in your life. So that's where I sort of realized that maybe, my story can inspire other women out there who have gone through, if not the similar kind, but if not exactly the same, but maybe similar kind of experience of whether, abuse in their marriage, or whether it's, childhood trauma. And that's where the healing part, or the modalities that I worked with and worked on myself, was very crucial to mention. And that's where, my story, along with the transition, the transformation I myself experienced, was very crucial to mention in the book itself.
Yeah, I think you made such a good point about how, putting your own experiences in that, which I would imagine is very hard too, because you're sharing such a deeply personal part of yourself, and of course for a greater purpose to help someone else. But it's so true when you can read a how-to manual, and you're not getting the heart behind it. So you I think maybe a reader would get in their mind that, like, oh, easy for you to say, you're just talking from a doctor perspective or a therapist perspective. But when you're reading something from somebody who knows your experience, or their own version of an experience, who understands pain and grief and loss and hurt and all of those things, I think it makes it that much more impactful for sure. So was the writing of the most difficult parts? Did you find that to be kind of cathartic? Was it difficult? What were your feelings going through that part of the writing process?
Like, I felt that there were some emotions, there were times where it was describing about my mother's departure, or my connection was deeply, it was very emotional for me. Along with that, my own near-death experience, and then, my father's departure after that. So there were few moments, like there were, few times where those things made me very, very emotional. But then as I was writing, I felt like it was a liberation. And there were even things that I was able to release, which I thought like I did not have it, strangely enough. And again, everything has its own timing and its own reason. So that being said, it was kind of a very profound experience. It was as if the divine was guiding, and, my mother, my father, they were my inspiration. So it was like I was channeling, and then my writing became that medium to express, coming and tapping in from that higher power, and to be able to express without judgment, without, critical, kind of aspect of what we usually carry. And it was just like, even though it's very personal, but it's okay to be vulnerable.
So you write about surviving profound emotional suffering and a near-death experience. Can you tell us a little bit, without giving away too much? I don't want you to give away too much from the book that people can read, but is there anything about this near-death experience that you can kind of share with us a little bit that sent you kind of on this trajectory?
Sure. So, prior to my near-death experience, like as I was going through my, childhood and my teens, I sort of went through with a lot of, in terms of bullying, in terms of, you have those doubts, those self-doubts, those questions inside of you that I'm not good enough, I'm not intelligent enough. I compared or was compared with others. So those kind of doubts instill, even though my mother was there with me. However, it was still, kind of an ongoing process. So during this near-death experience I was going through with a very sort of a abusive, toxic relationship, and during this time, I was always a very, in terms of my journey, right from childhood, I was very, very sensitive or hypersensitive, and I could sense things, see things, which, the logical brain can never explain. But then at the same time, the near-death experience sort of opened my view, my understanding of life beyond death at a very early age, I would say. It sort of kind of made me believe or validated my psychic abilities, or the visions that I used to get before that. And that was the time, or that was the phase, even though that had full of like its own challenges, the struggles, the trials, the tribulations. But that was, I think, the main like, that's where it got planted in terms of like, or got into validation, where I could understand that I have those capabilities. I have, I have a reason in my life, although not everything was clear right after my experience. And it took its own course of time with it, again, different lessons, learnings, challenges as I went through. But that was a huge, the pain that I was carrying before this near-death experience. It sort of opened my perspective. It shifted my perspective, and it started it gave me the courage as I came out of that there is a reason why I'm still alive, and why, it wasn't the time for me. But then at the same time, slowly but gradually, it opened my avenues. It opened my belief into different areas or aspects of life.
I mean, it's an experience that, most people, or a lot of people at least, can't say that they've had. So it's, to read that and hear how it affected you, and how it affected both negatively and positively, right? Like the dual effects, and then what you did with it, I think is always, one of the most compelling parts of anyone's story, anyone's memoir, or just personal life story. It's like, what did you do with what you were dealt, essentially? And it's just so fascinating to hear the journey that you took for that. It's just amazing. And as part of that, of course, your memoir deals with ideas of karma, past lives, and chakra healing. And I have to confess, I know so little about any of those things. So tell us a little bit about how you incorporate these aspects into your book.
Sure. That's kind of very interesting aspect also. And so like in terms of law of karma, or karma itself, that was something I used to hear. I used to learn from my mother. She used to say, about how it can kind of change your life, or, based on your karma. Sometimes it can be carried forward to your next life. So, our thoughts, our actions, our emotions, everything, it's part of that. So that had a profound impact on me. But again, sometimes we have to go through some of the experience in our life to understand, to relate, to resonate. So we come with our own, learnings, right? Even though the learnings were instilled in me, by my mother. But then, for example, this thing, when I was in my teens, I had my own sort of temper tantrums. So maybe I took my domestic help for granted. That was a very, like, as I expected, I was able to relate or connect the dots. And maybe that was, that could be very, very kind of a normal thing, on, a norm for any teenager. However, it was quite interesting for me when I was in my previous relationship with my ex. I realized that how I was treated by him was, in fact, 50, 70 times bigger, more than what I had or may have treated my own health. And so that, and as I was going my own healing, my own spiritual awakening. And I did, lots of introspection to understand, because again, the reason why we go through with something, the answer doesn't lie, outside. The answer, everything, resides within us. So it's basically through that introspection, I was able to, that's just like one simple example that sort of made me understand that how the law of karma is so powerful, and what we do, what we say, what we think has such a profound, effect in our life. And it sort of creates, it's like a bank, what you're depositing is what you're going to receive at the end, right? So it's very, very like, very, very simultaneously with law of attraction and your karma is. So that was like, again, a very sort of reality check for me, and made me understand that how it can be crucial. And and when it comes to the past life regression, there sometimes what happens with us, like certain sort of fears, phobias, some people have sort of phobia of dark rooms or small spaces, closets. Some people have they can't fly, like Peter. I've had clients that they were terrified to fly because they would think that they might die. So sometimes what happens, like we cannot understand, identify, or pinpoint as to why are we experiencing these patterns, like what is, and we are unable to find it through our logical mind that it's coming from this particular lifetime. And so sometimes we are sort of bringing those patterns from our previous lifetimes. And if we release, heal, understand as to why, what happened there, maybe like, in the past that somebody died of XYZ situation and circumstances, and that's why they have a fear of phobia that, it might happen again. Everything is being stored, and that's why past life regression is very crucial. And in my own healing journey, there were some patterns, like I went through abusive relationships one after another. And again, there were some of the, the reasons were sort of connected to, some of them were connected to my previous past lifetimes where I was carrying the pattern of it. And until you do not stop or break the pattern, it's going to continue to happen. So that was a past life. And when it comes to the chakra healing, again, chakras are like the energy centers in your physical body, physical / aura body. And think of it like your car has different wheels, right? So you need to kind of take care. You need to align them, change them periodically, check for the air, etc. So the same thing, those chakras, that we have, when there is a disharmony or where the chakra is not rotating properly, that's where we experience issues, either at the physical level, emotional, spiritual, could be financial, could be anything. So it's like you have to, through the life force energy, we try to heal those chakras so that they operate, they work, at an optimum level, right? And again, our energy is it's not like going to remain the same every single day. So as the chakras, so we have to do it like more maintenance phase. So in my own case, for example, what I experienced through chakra healing, I had a lot of resentment, so think of it, your heart chakra, right? It's all about compassion. It's about self-care, self-love, and that, thankfulness and gratification for everything. So during my childhood or my teens, like I had a lot of sort of carried some resentment, or even later in life. But as I was going through my own healing, I realized I was able to sort of bring more appreciation. I was able to bring self-love, self-care for myself, because if you do not have that, you cannot operate to anyone else. So when the heart chakra sort of opened my perspective and for everything that was related to that, and brought that in gratification for everything I have, and even for gratification for those lessons that I had or I was experiencing it, that there was a deeper reason that why I went through, and I learned from that, I evolved from that. So that's how chakra healing can be very, very crucial in day-to-day life or for maintenance. And when you heal those chakras and you relate and resonate, and sometimes it's not necessary that we should know as to, I know chakra healing, or do I know, or I need, past life regression. So sometimes, it's recommended to have a guide, a practitioner who can help you, guide you in your journey. And because I had to take help for myself when I started my own healing. And so, yes, we don't find all the answers by ourselves, as it can be overwhelming when we are going through such challenging times. But then, yes, looking for that, who can be your guide, mentor, who can hold you accountable. I think that's the key.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. All of it is so interesting to me and intriguing, and I know it's so appealing to such a wide variety of people. And I think it's really amazing that there's so many different ways that people can seek out how to improve their lives so that they can I kind of want to say pay it forward, but I think you know what I mean by just when you fix yourself, basically you're able to help others to be more effective in helping other people. So I think it's great that there's so many different avenues and ways of doing that. And I was struck by when you talked about karma, because people who don't know much about karma, and I include myself in that, we use that term so loosely, so flippantly. And I think most people, including myself, have used that term in almost like it only applies to a negative thing. Like if somebody was mean to you and then they trip and fall right after, like, well, there's karma for you. Like that's how people, I think, utilize that word. And I like the way that you made me think about it, which was as a way of and correct me if I'm wrong, please, but almost like a way of personal accountability, like your response, what you do and how you act, you have such a greater responsibility, so whether it's good or bad, it's just kind of what you put out will come back to you in one way or another. Is that kind of the right mindset to have with that?
No, absolutely. You what you said or described is exactly what it is. It's like, again, the law of attraction. What you think, it's all going to come back. So again, taking charge of your own thoughts, your own feelings, emotions, and again, the karma is the key.
Yeah, and and I would have to say to anyone watching or listening, and who has different perspectives, different spiritual views, whatever the case is, like no matter where someone lands on the spiritual side of it, it really sounds like such a profound and meaningful experience and healing process for you, and then for you to take and help other people. The effect of writing and publishing this book for other people, it sounds like it's got to be such a life-changing experience. Yes
I totally agree. It was a life-changing, because all my life I couldn't express my emotions. I couldn't express what so this expression I wanted to use as my own power, my courage and strength to express, even if it was through my own vulnerability, or whether it was through an act of courage. So I wanted to kind of express that, and that was, again, as I mentioned before, it was a profound experience, and that was a life-changing, because it's your personal story. So but then again, it was something that I had to ask myself, that it's raw, it's authentic, it's something that relates to me. So if there might be somebody, if not anything else, they can be helpful, and right from childhood all the way to my recent times, that there was nothing that sort of happened instantly or changed instantly. But then at the same time, understanding that there is a ray of hope. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. And then sometimes we can find ourselves totally lost with our struggles and challenges. But just having that innate power, that trust and belief in that higher power, and surrendering yourself to your guides, to your guardian angels, is really kind of it can be life-changing. So yes, through this expression, I was able to not only express myself, but the goal was to serve to others who can get some guidance, who can get some benefit that again, it's not the attitude, it's the attitude of the person, right?
Right.
That can make or break things. So this was a profound experience, and this expression was something that in fact healed me some of the things that I wasn't even considering. So yes, thank you for asking me such a wonderful question.
Thank you for a wonderful answer.
Again, life can be full of struggles, or life can have those turbulent experiences, but that does not mean that it's the end. And having that hope, that courage, resilience that can really help and transform, and having that innate belief and power in yourself, and trusting that higher power sort of can make huge difference. And as I mentioned before, it's not about the altitude, it's the attitude. So no matter what comes in, there's a light. There is that ray of hope that I always believed, and that can simply change and do wonders in your journey.
Yeah, I love that. And you use one of my favorite words, resilience. I love that word. It's so true. That's such a great, important, significant thing to have in life for success, and whatever success looks like for the individual, whether, it's emotional, financial, like whatever you think success is to you. I think that foundation, or part of the foundation, is resilience. So I love that you use that word. I have one last question for you that I don't know why I just thought of it right now. The title of your book, explain the title of your book a little bit, if you will. Like, how did you come up with that title? Because it's a great title.
So yeah, it's kind of, the veil. It was something that came through digging into doing a lot of kind of summarizing or bringing that to my life as to what that was. And as I mentioned, whether it was like, when you open the veil, or when the veil is not there, you can see through and understand as to what is happening on the other side. So whether it was my near-death experience, or whether it was like tapping into that higher, power, and bringing in those previous, past life karmic experience with myself, all that sort of contributed in picking up, when it comes to this title, and that sort of defines about who I am, what my journey, because as I mentioned, that was like an exploration and peeking through that to understand as to what life is, what it what I experienced, and who I am, or what I became afterwards. So yes,
I love that. I thought it was such a powerful, intriguing title. It's like one of those titles that you feel like I have to pick up this book and see what it's about. So well done. Very well done on that. Is there anything else you would like for our audience to know? Well, I know what I would like for our audience to know. Where can they find your book?
It's on Amazon. It's on other platforms too, but it's easily accessible on Amazon.
Perfect. But do you have a website for them to go to, or not right now?
Yes, it's the website is also there, and so that is author tulsic.com. So that's the website that they can go through, and as I mentioned, it's on Amazon, so they can sort of go and check that book out there.
Perfect. Tulsi, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing your experiences and your journey and of course, your book with not just me, but our audience. It was an absolute joy to have you on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elsa. I'm really grateful to you and for having me on your show. So I really appreciate your time and taking interest in my
Absolutely. Absolutely. Guys, I will put the links to the book and Tulsi's website in our show notes. You'll be able to click right on it, go right to it, purchase them, learn more about Tulsi. And we look forward to seeing you guys in the next episode. So take care. Bye-bye.
You've got a story worth sharing. Now it's time to tell it well. Whether you're an author, entrepreneur, influencer, or podcast guest, stepping in front of the camera or microphone can feel overwhelming. On the other side of the mic is your practical, encouraging guide to becoming a confident, authentic, and engaging interviewee. Written by media personality and best-selling author Elsa Kurt, This book blends real-world wisdom from hundreds of interviews with a touch of humor, grace, and heart. It's more than a how-to. It's a roadmap to presence, professionalism, and peace in every conversation.